Welcome to the Private School Leader Podcast, where private school leaders learn how to thrive and not just survive as they serve and lead their schools. I strongly believe that it is possible to have a long and happy and fulfilling career as a private school leader. And my passion is to help you figure out exactly how to do just that right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And I'm your host, Mark Minkus. So I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I learned this little poem, and it says 30 days has September, April, June, and November. All the rest have 31, except for February. It's the one which only has 28 days clear and 29 in each leap year. So that probably brought back some memories for some of you. But here's the thing. That poem has a lie embedded in it. And, it says that 30 days has September, April, June, and November. All the rest have 31. But see, there's a month on the calendar that has 100 days in it, or at least it feels that way. And that's the month of May. And if you're listening to this in real time, we're about in late March. And so we're about 5 weeks out from the beginning of the 100 days of May, as we sometimes call it. And, why does May feel like it has 100 days in it? Well, it's because of the concerts and the spring dance and the sports banquet and the National Honor Society banquet and the final exams and teacher observations and school play and field day and art show and spring sports and year-end trips and graduation and so on and so on and so on. Okay? So, sometimes we think about that we just want to survive the month of May. And, we do this kind of like army crawl across broken glass to get to the last day of school. And we're just in kind of survival mode. But, here on this podcast, we like to go from survival mode to thriving. And so on today's episode of the Private School Leader Podcast, I'm going to teach you 3 things to do now and 4 things to do later to thrive during the 100 days of May. And before we get into that, I just want to tell you, I am super excited. I have a brand new resource for you, and I want to share it with you for free. And this is a 45-minute masterclass called Winning at School Without Losing at Home. And this is a video webinar training, and it has guided notes, and it will do exactly what the title says. This training will help you be successful, organized, and energized at school while still taking good care of yourself and your family. Now, I know that might sound too good to be true. That might sound like a fairy tale, but go to theprivateschoolleader.com/winning to grab your free masterclass training, Winning at School Without Losing at Home. That's a 45-minute video webinar with guided notes, and that's theprivateschoolleader.com/winning. So I really hope that you grab that, and I just want to give that to you for free as a way to say thank you for listening to the podcast. And another question for you, is it just me, or are the parents at our schools getting more demanding, more intense, more often? I don't know about you, but it certainly feels that way, and dealing with parents is part of the job as we lead our private schools. But it can quickly lead to stress and anxiety and feeling overwhelmed. And that's why I created Parent Academy. And now you have a step-by-step framework that will help you go from feeling stressed and anxious to feeling confident and calm. And over the last 33 years, I've built successful relationships with thousands of parents, and I've packaged all that I've learned into an online course. And I teach you during the first 4 teaching modules all the strategies, and then I teach your teachers the same strategies, because Parent Academy also contains 2 45-minute webinars that are teacher PDs, and it has a printable workbook with guided notes and discussion questions, and several schools around the country have already used this plug-and-play PD with their teachers, and the feedback has been really, really good. So I want you to check this out. You can go to theprivateschoolleader.com/Parent Academy to learn more. That's theprivateschoolleader.com/Parent Academy. Okay, so on today's episode, we're talking about how to thrive during the 100 days of May. And I'm going to give you 3 things to do now and 4 things to do later. And so if you're listening in real time, we're near the end of March, and so we're about a month out from the 100 days of May. So 3 things to do now, and then 4 things to do during the month of May. So let's get into it. Number 1 on your list of things to do now is check your calendar. Now, I know that sounds like, duh, of course, check your calendar, but hear me out. I want you to look at your calendar for May, but I also want you to compare that to your personal calendar. And many of you probably have your dentist appointment and doctor's appointment and the kids' orthodontist appointment already in your school calendar. But if not, you need to merge those because you don't want to be caught up short and get a surprise when it comes to school events. And depending on the age of your kids, some of them are involved in sports or the musical or other after-school activities, and there's a lot of running around. And so there's a lot of coordinating, and that becomes even more complex during the month of May. So you want to merge those calendars. You want to take a look, just really sitting down and blocking out key dates and, looking at, well, when is the board meeting and when do I need to prepare for that? And, it's easy to become really focused on the events during May because that takes up a lot of headspace and a lot of planning. But there's typically other things that are the normal recurring things that are still happening, like a board meeting or like, getting ready for, be it achievement tests or finals or, other things that maybe are not event oriented. But take a look even beyond that. And it's like, okay, what are your specific responsibilities with regards to these events and what are the deadlines? And here's a big thing. When you're looking at May, okay, I want you to think through the lens of what can I move to April? Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, I can't move graduation. I can't move the spring dance or prom. Okay, yes, there are going to be a lot of things that you can't move to April. And maybe there's things that you can't move to April this year. But I want you to start thinking about moving things out of May. And so maybe it's not the events. Maybe it is that you're always getting caught up. You're trying to get caught up on teacher observations, and it's in the month of May, and you're like, every year I tell myself I'm going to have them done by the end of April, and every year I don't. Okay. That's one way of looking at it with regards to what are the things that are quote unquote negotiable? What are the things that could be moved into May? And so if there's anything, whether it's slamming yourself in April so that you're not getting double slammed in May, I think is preferable. And so if you have to jam a bunch of teacher observations into April just so that you don't have any left to do in May, I know that it's going to be worth it for you in the end. And so if it's graduation prep or whatever it is, see what you can move out of May into April. And some of that has to do with staffing decisions. Every school is on a little bit of a different timeline when it comes to that. Obviously, if you're interviewing to try to fill staff positions, that's just going to happen when the candidates are available. But I want you to just kind of take a fresh look at your May calendar and a fresh look at all of your tasks that you do and think about, okay, which of these things, even if I'm slammed during April, which of these things could I move into April? Okay, things we're going to do now. Number 2 is to improve communication. So communication is super important in our private schools, but at busy times of the year, like the month of May, communication is even more important, but sometimes that's the thing that gets neglected. And that's super, super problematic. And think about it this way. There's more events that parents are invited to. Sometimes there's more events during the day. I know some of the things that I was mentioning before are more middle school and upper school oriented, but whether it's the 3rd grade state fair or the 1st grade biographies or the, innovators museum, that the younger students are doing, these are things that parents will come to, and some of them take place during the day, especially with the younger students. A moving up ceremony, these kinds of things. And so parents who work outside the home, or for that matter, parents who, are working remotely, or the working as a stay-at-home mom, they need time, and they need advance notice, and it can't feel like it's kind of last minute. And if we are very proactive with the communications, we can make sure that they have plenty of time and that we're showing lots of respect for our families. I'll give you a quick example. I was always in charge of the end of year 6th grade field trip, and we went to, it was like an outdoor environmental education type trip with, the other things thrown in there: kayaking, archery, rock wall climbing, all that stuff. Okay. I was in charge of that trip. And so the packing list, okay, for that trip, you wouldn't think necessarily that needed to get out as early as maybe what the parents are asking for it. But what I learned over the years is that it's best to get that out as early as I could, because sometimes parents, just their lives are so busy. And, sometimes, let's face it, some of the stuff, it's that they're choosing to be overscheduled because their kids are in so many activities. But we don't know their story. They've got aging parents. They've got doctor's appointments that they've got to go to. They've got all kinds of stuff that's going on. Maybe it's a single parent home. So we just want to give them as much notice as possible. Something like the 6th grade year-end field trip, overnight trip with the packing list. So that's just one example. But now's the time, late March, early April is the time to make sure that our communications are locked down, that they're solid. And one way we can start is just by clarifying roles. I can't remember exactly who said this quote right now, but the quote is that the biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has occurred. And so we often think that, we said it, and so that means we communicated. But how many times can you think back to when it was like pointing fingers, or people were saying, well, I thought, and this and that. And so that's true about communication. And it's also true about who's in charge of the different roles to get ready for these events. So specifically, task number 2 that we're going to do now to thrive during the 100 days of May is to improve communication. And then task number 3 is that we're going to use Chat GPT. So let me explain how we can use Chat GPT to help us thrive during the 100 days of May. So you open up Chat GPT and you just fully describe the event in the box. And you just write everything in there that you possibly can. So for example, let's say my school, my most recent school went up to 8th grade, and 8th grade graduation is what I'm describing. So I'm describing 8th grade graduation in the gym, this many students, probably about this many guests. There's music, there's speeches, there's a video, there's, needs to be photos of each graduate when they get their diploma, group photo, light refreshments in the cafeteria, just everything that you can think of, you write it into Chat GPT. Just type it all in there, okay? And then you ask Chat GPT to create a checklist of all necessary tasks and items for that event. And I guarantee you that there are going to be things that pop up there that you didn't think of, or that you forgot, or that every year is like, oh man, we forgot about this or that. And so for your events, and this doesn't have to be you as the school leader that's doing this, I know that some of you have a small team or no team, but if you have someone working in the office, this would be a good task for them. And then they can copy and paste that and dump it into a Google Doc, name it, and then share it. And then, you can edit it a little bit. But I'm telling you, this can be a win in a few different ways. One is helping you to not forget things, but the other is that you're documenting recurring events. And let's face it, we have turnover and in our schools, and we have turnover as to who's in charge of these different events. And isn't it frustrating when, there's someone new and we want them to be in charge of XYZ event, but we don't have something to hand them. So diagrams, checklists, all the things, we can get an assist from ChatGPT on these issues. So to just review the 3 things that we're going to do now to thrive during the 100 days of May. Number 1, check your calendar. Number 2, improve communication. And number 3, use ChatGPT. And now we're going to move on to the 4 things that we're going to do later. So these are 4 things that you're going to do during the month of May. Okay? So number 1 is trust and delegate. So during the 100 days of May, as school leaders, sometimes you feel like you're doing everything. And sometimes it's because you are doing everything. And so all of the audience members that are listening to this episode, each of us have a different degree of effectiveness with delegation. Some of us are really good at it and some of us are really terrible at it. And so we just have to lean into delegation and trust. And you're like, yeah, well, I'm a small team and I don't really trust my people to do this. And so then what that leads to is you micromanaging it. And I think that your team is probably more capable than what you think. And if you're really clear on, I need you to do this, and make sure that you're telling and not asking, make sure they understand that you're telling and not asking, but then follow up with an email of the verbal conversation. And this is a great place where then that Google Doc with the checklist that ChatGPT gave us an assist, the diagram of what the gym is supposed to look like, that's where these things come in handy, because you can share that with the person that you're delegating it to. And then you're going to check in and make sure that this and that are handled. But if you are tired of doing everything, then it does take some effort. It takes some time. It takes a little bit of courage. It takes some trust. But one of the ways to thrive during the 100 days of May is to trust and then delegate. And we're going to get an assist by using our Google Docs that were checklists that were helped by ChatGPT to create, so that then these can be things that are referred to, and it's not all verbal. I just think that's part of our problem in private schools is we're in such a hurry that we have these conversations or we say stuff at meetings and then stuff doesn't happen and then everyone's mad and everyone's pointing fingers. So we just have to get some stuff down onto Google Docs in addition to those verbal conversations. Okay. The second thing that we're going to do now to thrive during the 100 days of May, that we're going to do in May, is that we are going to become super focused on self-care. So I'm talking about drinking enough water and getting enough sleep and the kind of food that you're eating. And, May lends itself to a lot of fast food and a lot of drive-thrus, after events. Moving your body a little bit, getting some fresh air. And so I get it. Like, this time of year isn't the time of year for you to, be starting an exercise program. But what I'm talking about is, maybe being more intentional about getting outside during recess. For that 10 minutes can make a huge difference with some fresh air, some sunshine, interacting with some kids, seeing some kids with smiling faces, having some fun. Because in May, we become super focused on the outcomes. Was this event a success? Were there enough garbage cans? Was there enough toilet paper in the bathrooms? Were there enough refreshments? And all of that is important. But we become super events and outcomes oriented in May. And often what we forget about is why we're doing this in the first place. It's because of the kids. And so we need to make sure that we're interacting with kids. And I've said before, I did an episode on it. I can link it in the show notes at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 128. I've said it before, there's joy on your campus, it's just not in your office. I think it's super important during May for you to be even more intentional, even if it's just for 5 minutes a day or 10 minutes twice a week, to go to the joy. Pop into a classroom, read a story to kindergarten. And I can hear what you're saying, what you're thinking. You're like, yeah, right. That is the time of year where I have the least amount of time to do that thing. I know, but it's also the time of year when you need to do that the most. And so if you do the math on, how long 5 minutes is out of your 168 hours of your week, it's an incredibly small number, but it can have a disproportionately large positive impact on your week. And then the last thing is that weeknights and weekends become especially important during the month of May. And I know that sometimes your weeknights and weekends are taken up with some of these activities, with some of these banquets or concerts or graduations. And maybe depending on the age of your kids, they're going to grad parties or all these other things. I get that. But to just be as protective of your weeknights and weekends as possible during May, because you've heard it before, you can't pour from an empty cup. And if you start with a full cup on May 1st and you don't do anything to put any water back in that cup over the course of the 31 days of May or the 100 days of May, your thing's going to be empty along about day 7 or 9, okay? So we need to do some things, combining this, focus on self-care with being intentional about going to the joy, trying to get some sleep, and trying to take care of ourselves, and just really emphasizing that more than at really any other point in the year. The only other time I could equate it to is that week of teacher in service and the first week of school. It's that stressful and that exhausting. So we need to take care of ourselves. The third thing that we're going to do in May is we're going to celebrate. So this is something that I actually learned from my wife, because I would come home from an event and she would say, well, how did it go? And I'd be like, well, it went really well. And she's like, well, that's worth celebrating. And I'd be like, well, what do you mean? And my wife would say, well, you put as much work into the thing if it's a success as you do if the thing is a complete failure. And she's right. And we need to pause and celebrate and enjoy these events, because we are so we have a bias towards action as school leaders, and it's all about go, 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 and it's all about what's next. Okay, what's next? Boom, check that off. Sports banquet. Boom, what's next? Okay, middle school awards assembly. Okay, boom, what's next? Dance. Okay, what's next? I get that, and that's how we have to be to kind of get through. But I think the mindset of next plus fatigue equals not displaying gratitude and not celebrating the wins. And I'm going to say that again. I think the mindset of next plus fatigue equals not displaying gratitude and not celebrating the wins. And so the displaying gratitude part is, there's a lot of people that make these things happen. And so whether it's in the staff memo the next morning, if it's on morning announcements, if it's in the all-school religious service, weekly or daily, the chapel, mass, tefillah, if it's an all-school assembly, and you're just in writing in the staff memo or verbally in those other spaces, just saying thank you so much for everybody that helped out with the dance last night, or everyone that helped out with the sports banquet last night, or whatever the case might be. I think the morning after thank you email, or at least the morning after thank you paragraph at the very top of the daily memo, if you have a daily memo, is super important, because those people are tired too. Okay? We're tired, but they're tired too, and they worked hard and they got home late as well, and they were on their feet all day, and a little goes a long way when we express gratitude. But when we don't express gratitude, I feel like it feels disproportionately crappy to our people, to our teachers and our team. And so you're like, well, how am I going to do that? Because I have good intentions, but I don't follow through and blah, blah, blah. That's where schedule send is your best friend. I mean, you can write a nice email on a Tuesday at 1 p.m. that's going to schedule send on Friday morning at 8 a.m. when the middle school dance is on the Thursday night. And it's like, oh, well, that's disingenuous. Is it? What's better? Not sending the email? Okay. So I'm just saying that we need to use our brains. And if we're not going to have the energy to write that email at 11 o'clock on the Thursday night when we get home from the event, then we need to be proactive, but we need to be thanking our people. And then we also need to be celebrating and trying to be present and enjoying the moment. Like, it's when these kids are up there and they're doing their thing, it's the band concert, or it's the spring musical, or it's the art show, and they're so proud of the thing that they created, or it's graduation and it's the kid that cried every single day in 4th grade and now it's 8th grade and they're up there graduating and getting some award. I mean, that's why we do what we do, is those transformations that we help work with our teachers to make happen and create a culture where those kids can blossom. We got to try and be present in the moment. And I was bad at that earlier in my career. I had my head on a swivel and I'm looking for all the stuff, whether it's security or maintenance or the sound system or whatever it is. I get that. And you're still not going to be able to turn off that part of your brain. But I think it's really important that we pause and try to be present and enjoy the moment, because May is often a month of celebrations. And if we're not celebrating those kids and all it is that we're running an event, I think that that's a recipe for you feeling unfulfilled at work. And so since May hasn't happened yet, hopefully if you're listening to this in late March or in April, there's still time for us to kind of change our intentionality and mindset about that. And then that brings us to the fourth and final thing that we're going to do in May. And that is that you're going to start your Better May Next Year Google Doc. Okay, so let me hit you with that again. Start your, quote, Better May Next Year, end quote, Google Doc. You're literally going to start a Google Doc that's titled Better May Next Year. Because every year, May is so busy that while you're in the moment, you're like, oh man, it was really hard to hear the graduation speaker. We need to update that sound system. Or, you know, the place that makes the trophies for the sports banquet, they misspelled like 3 kids' names again this year. Okay, well, in the moment you're frustrated, but where do you capture that so that you're not sitting there a year from now being annoyed that you can't hear the graduation speaker, or talking to the parent that's frustrated because their kid's name is misspelled again on the trophy? Because you need to change the place, you need to change the business that you're supporting, that's making the trophies for your sports banquet. Where are you going to capture that? Well, if you have a Better May Next Year Google Doc, you just make a note, sound system for graduation, or trophies for sports banquet, misspelled names or whatever. And so that's the first step, is you're creating the Google Doc, you're putting stuff in there. You're going to turn your frustration in the present into action in the future. Let me say that again. You're turning your frustration in the present in May into action in the future. That's really hard because you're just trying to get through the 100 days of May. But what I want for you is for each May to get a little easier, a little more streamlined, a little more organized, a little less stressful. And one of the ways to do that is to improve the events. And one of the ways to improve the events is to have that Google Doc. And also, we need to review or reflect or get feedback about these events. And you're like, yeah, okay, that's, blah, blah, blah. That's frustrating and I don't have the time for that. Okay, I get it. But in April, you could set it up. Think about this. In April, you could create a Google form that is like just the 3 questions. What was the best part of this event? What went well? what didn't go well, and what would your suggestions for changing it in the future. You could use the same Google form for every event in May, okay? And then you could schedule send to a division, the intermediate school or all the lower school. If it's a lower school choral concert, for example, you could schedule send for the morning after all of those emails with a link to that Google form. And then all of that stuff just populates the Google Sheet. And you don't even have to look at it during May. But then you could go back to it in the summertime or in the fall when you're going to pull out your Better May Next Year Google Doc. Okay? It's a dumping ground for all the feedback, the Google Sheet. And if you don't know how to make a Google form, or you don't know how to make a Google form talk to a Google Sheet, I didn't used to know how to do that either. I watched a couple of YouTube videos and I figured it out. It's pretty simple. And so just to review that one real quick, you're going to start a Better May Next Year Google Doc. And when you think of stuff that is frustrating in the present, you're going to throw it in there so that you can take action on it in the future. And then the advanced step, quote unquote advanced, is you want to get feedback from the people involved with the event. And you could proactively create up one Google form that, and the first question on the Google form could be name of event. And then, like I said, 3 questions. What went well? What didn't go well? What are your suggestions for improving this event? And that Google form, those 4 questions, you're getting all that feedback. Is everyone going to fill it out? No. Or do you have time to read all that stuff in May? No. But maybe the second week of October you do. And this is the way that we're going to have each year get better, and the events get better, and the events get less stressful and more organized. Is we're not going to just run it back year after year exactly the same way. We're going to make it better. And then you're going to revisit that in the summer or in the fall. But the last piece of that is that you're going to put it in your calendar. So maybe on October 11th, it says Better May Next Year Google Doc for 30 minutes on a Tuesday morning or something like that. So calendar it so that it actually happens once the school year's underway and things have settled down a little bit. All right, let's wrap it up. 3 things to do now to thrive during the 100 days of May are 1, check your calendar, 2, improve communication, and 3, use ChatGPT. And 4 things to do later during the month of May. Number 1, trust and delegate. 2, become super focused on self-care. 3, celebrate and show gratitude. Number 4, start your Better May Next Year Google Doc. And your call to action is to do at least one of the do now tasks. Do it now within the next couple weeks. And then put a calendar reminder for late April to listen to this episode again. Because let's face it, the 4 things that you're going to do during May, when May rolls around, you're not going to remember. So put a calendar invitation. You can insert a link, copy paste. Let's say you listen to this on Apple Podcasts. You could put a link to this episode right there in the calendar invitation to yourself so that you remember to listen to it and then do the things that we just talked about, because these are making sense to you. I know they are. And you want to do them, but you're going to forget them. So you might need to revisit this. And even if that calendar reminder gets you just going to the show notes to take a look, that's fine. You don't necessarily have to listen to the whole thing again. So I just want to ask you a quick question as we wrap things up. Do you ever feel like you have nothing left at the end of the day for your family and then maybe feel a little guilty about that? Well, that's because our jobs are physically exhausting and emotionally draining. And I want to help you with that. And I've created a new resource that I mentioned at the top of the episode that I'm super excited about. And it's a free 45-minute masterclass, and it's called Winning at School Without Losing at Home. And I want to get this into your hands, the video, the guided notes. And it's at theprivateschoolleader.com/winning, where you can grab your free masterclass training, Winning at School Without Losing at Home. The 45-minute video webinar masterclass and guided notes are there for you for free at theprivateschoolleader.com/winning. And then one last reminder about Parent Academy. I really believe it could be a game changer for you and your teachers. 4 modules for you, 2 45-minute PDs for your teachers. So far, schools in North Carolina, Ohio, and Texas and California have used it, and the feedback is really, really great. And so check that out at theprivateschoolleader.com/parentacademy. And then one last favor, if you could just please share the link to this podcast with another leader that you know, a leader in your life, a school leader, and with a rising leader at your school. That's how we're going to get the word out and get this content into their hands so that they can learn all of these tools and these strategies as well. And I've been your host, Mark Minkus. I just want to say I appreciate you and all the hard work you're doing for the lucky kids and teachers at your school. Thank you so much for taking some of your precious time to join me here today. And I'll see you next time right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And until then, always remember to serve first, lead second, and make a difference.